The courtroom was so quiet you could hear someone breathe. A judge sat high above the room. Reporters filled the benches with notebooks in their laps. Cameras were not allowed inside, but everyone knew this moment would be on the news tonight. A man in a dark suit stood up and held a thick folder. His hands shook as he opened it. The folder was full of papers, letters, lists of names, and old notes that had been hidden for years. "This is about the Catholic Church abuse crisis," the man said, his voice tight. "These documents show what happened, who knew, and what was done to keep it quiet." The judge stared down at the folder like it was a heavy stone. In the first row, a woman named Maria pressed her hands together so hard her fingers turned white. Next to her sat a man named Daniel, his jaw clenched, his eyes fixed on the floor. Behind them were more people, some older, some younger, all with the same look, the look of someone who carried a secret pain for too long. The lawyer continued, "We are asking the court to unseal these records. People deserve the truth." The judge leaned forward. "If I unseal them," he said slowly, "the whole country will read what's inside." The lawyer nodded. "They should." A reporter named Emily Carter felt her heart pound. She worked for a small newspaper in Massachusetts called the Harbor Ledger. She had followed this case for months. She had heard whispers. She had seen doors shut in her face. She had watched people look away. But now, the folder was in the open. Emily glanced at the old wooden door at the side of the courtroom. A man in a collar, Father Thomas, sat nearby with his head lowered. His face looked gray, like he hadn't slept in days. The judge lifted his pen. Emily held her breath. Then the judge said, "I'm going to make my decision." The room leaned in, and just as the judge began to speak, the door opened and a bailiff stepped forward, whispering into the judge's ear. The judge's eyes widened. His hand froze midair. He looked down at everyone and said one sentence that made the whole room go cold. "There's another file." Emily's stomach dropped. Another file meant more names, more stories, more pain. The judge turned to the lawyer. "You didn't tell the court about this," he said sharply. The lawyer looked stunned. "I didn't know," he said. The judge looked toward the bailiff. "Where is it?" he asked. The bailiff swallowed. "It was delivered this morning," he said, "from the church's archives." Emily's mind raced. If there was another file, what else had been hidden? And why was it showing up now, right before the judge decided to unseal everything? Emily's pen trembled over her notebook as she wrote 2 words, "New evidence." Then the judge stood up. "We will take a recess," he announced. "No one leaves." The gavel struck the wood like a thunderclap, and Emily knew the truth was closer than ever. Yet somehow it was still being protected by powerful hands. Months earlier, Emily didn't plan to cover a story like this. She was used to small-town work, traffic accidents, school meetings, lost pets, and local sports. That was what kept the paper going. That was what paid her rent. But one rainy afternoon, her editor called her into his office. "Emily," he said, "we got a tip." "A tip about what?" she asked. Her editor slid a small envelope across the desk. There was no return address. Inside was a short note. It read, "Ask about St. Bridget's. Ask about the transfers." Emily frowned. "Transfers?" Her editor nodded. "A source says a priest was moved quietly. Not fired, not arrested, just moved." Emily felt a strange chill. She knew what moved quietly could mean in stories like this. It meant problems were being covered instead of solved. She drove to St. Bridget's the next morning. The church stood on a hill, tall and calm, with bright stained glass windows that looked peaceful from the outside. Inside, it smelled like candles and old wood. A few people sat in the pews, heads bowed. Emily didn't want to hurt anyone's faith. She wasn't there to attack beliefs. She was there to ask questions about safety and truth, because those things mattered in every place, even a holy one. She asked to speak with the parish secretary. A woman named Mrs. Donnelly greeted her with a tight smile. "How can I help you?" she asked. Emily kept her voice gentle. "I'm a reporter," she said. "I'm looking into records about a priest who used to work here." Mrs. Donnelly's smile disappeared. "We don't talk about that," she said quickly. "Why not?" Emily asked. Mrs. Donnelly lowered her voice. Because it causes trouble, she whispered. And because people get hurt. Emily swallowed. People were already hurt, she said softly. Mrs. Donnelly looked away, her eyes glassy. You should leave, she said. Please. Emily stepped outside into the cold air. Her hands shook, not from the weather, but from a feeling that she had touched something dangerous. She went back to her car and called her editor. They shut me down, she said. They're scared. Her editor paused. That means the tip might be real, he said. Keep digging. So Emily dug. She searched old newspaper clippings. She looked through public records. She called survivor support groups. She found one man willing to speak, but only in a quiet diner far from town. His name was Daniel. Daniel sat across from her, stirring his coffee again and again. His voice was calm, but his eyes were tired. I was a kid, he said, and I trusted the wrong person. Emily didn't ask for details. She didn't need them. The pain in Daniel's face said enough. What do you want now? Emily asked. Daniel looked up. I want the truth to be seen, he said, and I want it to stop happening to anyone else. Emily nodded slowly. Do you know anything about transfers? She asked. Daniel hesitated, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded paper. It's a list, he said, names and dates, and where they were moved. Emily opened the paper. Her breath caught, because at the bottom, written in neat ink, were 3 words that made her heart slam hard. Church archive files. And Daniel leaned closer and whispered, they kept everything. Then he said something even worse. And there's more, a lot more, than anyone knows. Emily stared at the list, realizing she was holding the beginning of a storm. And that storm was about to hit the whole country. The courthouse hallway felt like a tunnel with no air. Emily stood near the wall, holding her notebook tight. People whispered in small groups. Some looked angry. Some looked scared. Some looked like they might faint. Maria sat on a bench, staring at the floor. Daniel stood nearby with his arms folded, like he was trying to hold himself together. A police officer walked past, and Emily noticed something strange. The officer wasn't relaxed. His hand stayed near his radio, and he kept looking toward a closed door where the judge had gone. The new file had changed everything. Emily took a careful step toward the lawyer from earlier, a man named Mr. Harris. He was talking to his assistant, his face pale. Mr. Harris, Emily said softly, do you know what's in the new file? He looked at her like he didn't know who to trust. Then he sighed. I don't know the full details yet, he said, but they say it came from an archive. It might include more names, more transfers, more proof of what was known. Emily's stomach tightened. Why would it show up now? She asked. Mr. Harris looked toward the door. That's the question, he said. Sometimes people deliver a file to control the story, to make it seem like they're being honest, even if they waited too long. Emily wrote that down. Then Maria suddenly stood up. Her hands were shaking. Excuse me, Maria said to Mr. Harris. If those papers are open, will the whole world see my name? Mr. Harris's face softened. We can fight to protect victims' privacy, he said gently. We can ask the court to keep certain details private. Your safety matters. Maria nodded, but her eyes filled with tears. I'm not ashamed, she whispered. I'm just tired. Emily felt her throat tighten. She didn't want to push anyone. She didn't want to make their pain into a headline. But she also knew the truth had been hidden for too long. A few minutes later, the judge returned to the courtroom. Everyone filed in again, moving slowly, like they were walking into a storm. The judge sat down and stared at the new file on his desk. It was sealed in a thick envelope. A red stamp marked it as confidential. The judge looked at Mr. Harris. You say you did not know about this file, he said. That's correct, Mr. Harris replied. Then the judge looked toward the other side of the room, where a church attorney sat with a team of people in suits. Did you know? The judge asked him. The church attorney cleared his throat. Your Honor, the church has many records, he said carefully. We are still reviewing what this file contains. The judge's eyes narrowed. That's not what I asked, he said. The room went dead quiet. The church attorney's jaw tightened. We were aware there were additional documents, he admitted. Emily's pen scratched quickly. They knew. The judge tapped the file with his finger. This case is about the Catholic Church abuse crisis, he said. It involves serious claims of harm and alleged efforts to hide the truth. This court will not tolerate games. The church attorney lifted his hands. We care deeply about the community, he said. We want healing. Maria made a sound that was half laugh, half cry. The judge turned to the bailiff. Bring the file forward, he ordered. The bailiff placed it on the table. The judge did not open it right away. He stared at it for a long moment, like he could feel the weight inside. Then he looked at the courtroom. Before I decide what to do with these records, he said, I want to hear from the people who've been waiting. He gestured toward the first row. Maria stood slowly. Her voice was quiet at first. I was a kid, she said. I trusted the adults around me. I trusted the place that told me it was safe. And when I tried to speak up, I felt like no one wanted to hear it. No one in the room moved. Maria continued, her eyes steady now. I'm not here because I hate the church. I'm here because I want children to be safe. And I want the truth to stop being buried. Daniel stood next. He didn't give details. He didn't need to. His words were simple and clear. They moved people, he said. They kept it quiet. They acted like the problem would disappear if they changed an address. But pain doesn't disappear like that. Emily saw Father Thomas in the corner. He kept his head down. His hands were clasped like he was praying, but his shoulders shook. Then the judge spoke again, slower this time. This court must balance privacy and justice, he said. But the public also has a right to know when an institution failed to protect children. Emily's heart pounded. This was it. This was the moment. The judge reached for the new file. Then the church attorney stood up quickly. Your Honor, he said, we request time, more time to review, more time to prepare. The judge looked at him like he was tired of hearing the same request. How much time? The judge asked. The attorney hesitated. Weeks, he said. A loud gasp moved through the courtroom. Maria whispered, No. Daniel's hands curled into fists. The judge's face hardened. No, he said firmly. Not weeks. He picked up his pen again. Emily held her breath so hard her chest hurt. The judge looked down at the file one last time. I will make a ruling today, he said, because waiting is how this crisis grew. He lifted the envelope flap, and at that exact moment, the courthouse doors burst open. A different officer rushed in, breathless, holding a phone and speaking fast to bailiff. The bailiff's eyes widened. The bailiff leaned toward the judge and whispered. The judge's face changed, sharp and alarmed. He sat up straight and said, Everyone remained seated. Emily's pen froze. The judge pointed toward the back of the room. Officers, he said, go now. 2 officers moved quickly down the aisle. The whole courtroom turned to look, and then Emily heard the words that made her blood run cold. They're trying to remove records from the church office right now. Emily's heart slammed, because if someone was rushing to remove records, it meant the truth in that file was even bigger than anyone imagined. The courtroom exploded into noise. People stood up at once. Reporters raised their heads. Maria grabbed the edge of the bench. Daniel's face went pale. The judge slammed his gavel. Order, he shouted. Everyone sit down. Now. Emily's heart raced as officers rushed out of the courtroom. She could feel it in her chest. This was no longer just about old papers. This was about stopping something happening right now. The judge stood. If anyone is trying to remove records, he said, his voice sharp, that is a serious matter. The church attorney rose again, his face tight. Your Honor, I have no knowledge of... Sit down, the judge said firmly. You've spoken enough. Minutes passed like hours. Emily looked around the room. Survivors sat frozen, afraid the truth would slip away again. Some stared at the door. Others closed their eyes, like they had seen this moment before, when help almost came, and then didn't. Emily thought of Daniel's list. Names, dates, transfers, if those records disappeared. So would answers. Finally, the doors opened again. 2 officers returned, followed by another man in uniform. He walked straight to the judge and spoke quietly. The judge listened without blinking. Then he nodded once. The officer turned and left. The judge faced the room. "The records have been secured," he said. No documents were removed. A sound moved through the room, half relief, half tears. Maria covered her mouth. Daniel closed his eyes and let out a long breath. Emily felt her knees weaken. The judge sat back down. "This confirms what this court feared," he said, "that there was concern about what these files contain." He looked directly at the sealed envelope on his desk. "I am unsealing the records." The words hit the room like thunder. Emily's hands shook as she wrote. "Unsealed," the judge continued. "Certain personal details will remain protected," he said. "But the names of leaders, the decisions made, and the pattern of transfers will be made public." The church attorney looked stunned. The judge added, "This court believes sunlight is necessary for healing." The envelope was opened. The clerk began to read. Emily listened as dates were spoken. Cities, churches, transfers from one place to another, over and over again. It was not one mistake. It was a pattern. Emily felt sick, not because of shock, but because of how clear it all was once the truth was allowed out. The judge ended the session hours later. People filed out slowly, like they had to survive the storm. Outside, reporters gathered fast. Microphones pointed. Cameras rolled. Emily stepped aside, her phone buzzing with messages from her editor. "Get the story," he wrote. "This is national." Emily looked at Maria and Daniel standing together. "Can I ask you something?" Emily said gently. Maria nodded. "What happens now?" Emily asked. Maria thought for a moment. "Now," she said, "people can't say they didn't know." Daniel added, "Now the truth has a place to stand." That night, Emily stayed up late writing. She wrote carefully. She chose words that told the truth without causing harm. She made sure the story focused on accountability, not anger, on protection, not fear. When the story was published, it spread fast. Other cities began to look at their own records. Other survivors came forward. Other courts asked hard questions. Some people were angry. Some were sad. Some were confused. But fewer people looked away. The church released statements. Promises were made. New rules were announced. Some leaders stepped down. It wasn't the end, but it was a start. Weeks later, Emily visited St. Bridget's again. The doors were open. A sign near the entrance read, "We are listening." She didn't know if the sign meant everything it said, but she knew something had changed. Emily stood outside for a moment, breathing in the cold air. She thought about the people who spoke when it was hardest, the ones who waited years, the ones who were never believed. She understood now that this story was not about faith or hate. It was about power. And what happens when power is not watched? Emily walked back to her car, her notebook lighter now. The Catholic Church abuse crisis had been hidden for a long time, but once the truth was spoken out loud, it could not be locked away again. And for the first time in years, many people felt something new, not fear, but hope.